Let's talk more about the fallout from the social media crackdown on President Trump. Joining us now is Rich Greenfield, partner and co-founder of Lightshed Partners. Rich, great to have you with us. You've got a buy rating. You continue to have a buy rating on Twitter, and I'll just start the conversation off there. And so presumably you think that this is not a big deal for Twitter, that the looming threat of regulation is not a big deal for Twitter, even though an EU commissioner, a German chancellor has come out and said basically that this is a problematic breach of the First Amendment. You don't think that regulation is a problem?
You know, look, I'd say that we see lots of forms of regulation or threats of regulation, but let's be clear. Look at how divided our government is. I mean, just look what happened in the elections, the main election, even the runoff last week. Our country is, razor thin margin of, in terms of kind of how we see major issues. The odds of sort of transformative legislation happening anytime in the next 12 months, and probably in the next several years, is quite challenging. The only thing I know for sure is it's going to take a very, very long time to get to consensus on very complicated issues that I don't have the answer of. I just listening to you all debate. Nobody, these are very challenging questions. I mean, think about the fact that, think about what we're talking about. If we change the topic and said instead of overtaking the Capitol, if it was about distributing child pornography, there's no doubt everyone would have a consensus view. It's good that it's good that Google takes it down. It's good that Facebook takes it down. It's good that Twitter takes it down. Is it a bright line red rule that overthrowing the government, being the president willfully telling people to go overthrow the government, is that a bright line rule that should be kind of viewed the same way? That's clearly what is being done here, that there was a clear view that this is something that just cannot stand and they have to take action. We can debate whether it's okay, but I think you're going to see years of legislation probably go nowhere to try to get to the right answer on this.
Hey, Rich, it's Dan. Thanks for joining us. So if you listen to the conversation before, we were talking about obviously the difference in scale between Facebook and Twitter. And one of the reasons why, I just have to be pessimistic about Twitter here is before all this happened, in Q3, they only had 1 million net ads. I have to think they go X growth here when you consider the fact that Facebook's going to have $100 billion in sales next year, growing at 20, 25%.
But hold on, Dan. But hold on. Let's just stop.
Yeah.
Remember that the only thing that's happening here is a political discussion. For everyone, you may be far right. You could be QAnon. I don't care how far right you are in terms of your political views on these issues. You may be Trump's biggest fans. If you want to know what happened with the Golden State Warriors last night, or if you love Charli D'Amelio, she speaks to her fans on Twitter. I mean, yes, President Trump is now gone from Twitter. First of all, a lot of his supporters are still very much on Twitter because they want to be involved in the debate. And if you go to even a platform like Parler, the problem with Parler was it was only right-wing discussion, and there's not the broader conversation that happens every day on Twitter. I mean, politics is a small part. I mean, we're talking, low teens % of total content on Twitter. Twitter's about entertainment. It's about, sports. I mean, you want to know what happened in the game. Like, it is a critical source of information that goes so far beyond politics.
Rich, I'm on Twitter just like you are. But what I'm saying is, listen for 1 second. What I'm saying here is that in Q3, they had 1 million net ads. And that was about as good as it got with all the sports coming back and everything. So take politics out of it. Take a guy who had 90 million followers and a bunch of cult followers on there. Even if you take that out, I'm not being political. I'm talking about the numbers here. I'm talking about their advertising. So what I'm saying is it's not growing. It's growing at 15% a year at best in sales right now. That's what I'm saying.
Users have doubled over the last 2 years. There was clearly a pull forward effect. I mean, we've seen pull forward effects. I mean, look what Reed Hastings said for Netflix. The pandemic in Q2 certainly had a pull forward effect from the rest of the year. I think there's no doubt about that. But if you think about what really drives Twitter, it's not just sports coming back. There's no doubt. But think about the return of just live events. I mean, so much in terms of product launches, events. I mean, as life gets back to normal, it may be more second half than first half, given what's unfortunately happening with the pandemic. But I think there's probably no better company position for the return of events. That's what Twitter was built for in terms of its ad spend. And look, the reality is, in terms of the future of Twitter, it probably has less to do with any form of specific content than monetizing its users better. It has now built a very substantial, as you point out, they had pretty incredible growth year over year throughout the first, the first 9 months of 2020. What they need to do is monetize better. I mean, the flywheel that drives Facebook, it's not the big brands. I mean, what everyone gets wrong about Facebook is it's not the big companies, it's not the Coke, it's not the P&Gs, it's all of those small businesses all around the world that drive. I mean, Facebook has 10 million advertisers because of direct response advertising. Twitter is building that. They're slow, they're late. There's no doubt about it. That's what's hurt the stock, was the delay in their movement into performance advertising is what's hurt the stock coming out of October. But the reality is you're going to see that refreshed and a real new initiative around what they call MAP 2.0 in 2021. That's what investors should be focused on. They're having an analyst day, I believe, in February. I think that's what's going to really create increased momentum around this stock, is getting the advertising piece, because you're right. Monetizing users is all people are going to care about. They have enough users. Now it's about monetizing.
So we have 15, 20 seconds left, Rich. Bottom line for us, at the end of the day, these social platforms will feel no impact from what has gone on in Washington, D.C.?
I would never say no impact. I mean, there's no doubt that people freaked out about sort of the near-term impact. But I think the reality is these are core parts of our daily lives. And I don't think, you may be okay leaving Facebook. Most people are not okay leaving Instagram. Most people are not okay around the world leaving WhatsApp. It's very hard to get away. These platforms are a core part of life, whether we like it or not. And in some ways, these platforms are almost becoming equally important to the future of the world as the governments themselves and the regulators themselves. And that's a very difficult issue that's going to take years for regulators to figure out.
Rich, always great to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
Rich Greenfield, Lightshed Partners. What does that say about our society if technology is becoming that powerful? Tim Seymour, do you agree that at the end of the day, there is very little impact? There will be very little impact on these social media platforms?
Well, I personally, first off, agree that regulators around the world, and we've talked a lot about what's going on in China. I don't think this is an attack on Jack Ma as much as it is regulators having to get a hold of major financial platforms and social media and e-commerce in China as well. And obviously China, where the state is involved in every transaction. But back to these companies, Rich also mentioned the ad spend. I think there are going to be winners and losers in terms of where advertisers feel there is a more brand friendly. And clearly, following Snap and following that chart, and also following their ability to maybe stand out of the way of some of this, I think is clear. Guys, Pinterest is another place where I think it's a less controversial place for advertisers. Again, it's not for all advertisers, but I do think there is a case here. Guy also brings up the ESG component of where Facebook's probably got some targets on its back. But as much as I've been critical, cynical about Facebook, I do think that right now, unless you take it apart, and where I think the sum of the parts might be worth more than it is right now, I think it's going to be very difficult to change the story there.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.